Well, hello, cutie. I'm back. And today we have another episode of Beauty and the Bibliophile. If you're new here, welcome to my channel and welcome to the Cute Life. I'm your cult leader, Leah. If you're not new here, thank you for returning for another cult meeting. As often as I can, I do a series called Beauty and the Bibliophile, where I do my makeup and I tell you about the latest book that I've read. Today's book is Poor Unfortunate Souls, The Tale of the Sea Witch by Serena Valentino. And this is the third book in the Villains series. So we are going to be learning the backstory of Ursula. Now, if you haven't seen Disney's The Little Mermaid, the animated one, the real one, you are probably not going to know what's going on in this video. So I would suggest watching that first before watching this video. Also, we've already done the first two books in this series. You should probably watch those too, otherwise you're going to be very lost. And I will link those videos below. Also, spoiler alerts, if you are thinking about reading this book and you don't want to know anything about it, then don't watch this video. If you're thinking about reading it and you don't mind a few spoilers, you will know the ending. Or you don't want to read it, but you still want to know the story, then stay tuned. Okay, so Poor Unfortunate Souls, The Tale of the Sea Witch by Serena Valentino. And this came out in 2016. The story starts with Ursula trekking through the town of Ipswich, and she is angry and her magic is infused with it. And beneath that hate, a deep, penetrating sorrow. The people of this village had taken someone from her, the only person that had ever loved her, and she was going to make them pay for that. So she called forth her dark minions, the sirens, and they let out this terrible song that drew the people out from their homes and spellbound them to their song and to whatever Ursula wanted them to do. Now blood dripped from the people's ears and mouth. Ursula wanted them to suffer for what they had done to her. Then Ursula said, "By the power of the old gods, I call you to me. Claim these humans for the sea." Then all the people fell to the ground and started convulsing and changing into these hideous sea creatures that were bound to do Ursula's bidding for her. Ursula started laughing her witchy laugh, and the laugh penetrated the ears of every witch in the many kingdoms, and they all knew that the power of hate-infused magic. They also knew the destruction that it could bring. So Ursula steps back into the waves, and as her feet touch the water, and all the little creatures that she had just transformed the village people into start going into the water, and Ursula starts transforming back into her true form, which is the octopus monster Ursula that we all know and love. Okay, I'm gonna let my skincare sit in for a few minutes before we move on to makeup. All of a sudden, she hears a voice say, "Ursula, stop this lunacy at once." And it's Triton. And Ursula's like, "Who are you to command me?" And he's like, "I'm your brother." He's like, "His sister." He's like, "You know, that shell necklace that you wear, that was a gift from our father." He was like, "You know, we thought we had lost you forever. I never expected to find you in this situation with all this destruction coming from you." And Ursula's like, "You know nothing about my life or how I've suffered." And Triton's like, he's like, "Ursula," he's like, "You know what? I'm sorry. It's time that I brought you home." Now, years later, Ursula returned to these shores because she was meeting up with some very close friends, the Odd Sisters. Remember them? Martha, Lucinda, and Ruby. And as Ursula is greeting them, she's thinking, man, these witches, they are the thing of legends. They were the cousins of the old king, who was the father of the new queen, Snow White. And they were great benefactors to the dark fairy and her sleeping princess. Now, Ursula owed her newly regained power to the Odd Sisters. They had returned her seashell necklace to her in exchange for something that their little sister had wanted. And Ursula said, I'm so happy to see you, as she gave them a big hug. And the sisters, in unison, said, oh, I see you're wearing the gift we got you. Talking about the seashell necklace that she was wearing. And Ursula's like, oh yes, thank you, my dear friends. She's like, you know, you're gonna have to tell me how you got it back from Triton one of these days. Circe didn't really tell me when she brought it to me. And Ursula's like, well, by the way, where is Circe? She's always with you. Now, at the mention at Circe's name, the Odd Sisters started crying because she was the reason that the Odd Sisters had called on Ursula. She was missing. They had used their magic to try and find her and to plead for forgiveness for something that they had done to her, but Circe didn't answer. So they summoned the Sea Witch for help. And, you know, they knew that Ursula would want something in exchange. She always did. She was the maker of deals. Lucinda tells Ursula that, you know, that's why they came to her, because they can't find Circe and they need her help to find her. And Ursula is like, well, did you try summoning her in one of your many enchanted mirrors? And the sisters were like, no, it didn't work. Circe must have cast some kind of spell so that our enchanted mirrors wouldn't work. And Ursula's like, okay, don't worry. She's like, we're gonna find your sister. And Ursula smiled and she gave them a big hug again. And as she was hugging them, she transformed back into her human form, Vanessa. Now, she knew that the Odd Sisters would do anything for their sister, Circe. And she did want to help them. And she would have no matter what. But it just so happened she needed something from them and their special brand of magic. So the Odd Sisters and Ursula, they go back to the Odd Sisters' house, which is a gingerbread style mansion on the cliffs near the sea. And Ursula asks them, she's like, oh, is the dark fairy going to join us? And Lucinda's like, oh, no. She's like, fire and water don't mix. And Ursula was thinking to herself, she's like, I wonder why the Odd Sisters so feared a convergence between her and the dark fairy. Now, Ursula had been to their house many times, but at several different locations. And inside their house was decorated in all of these mismatched teacups. And Ursula wondered which ones they had stolen from various people. She wondered which cups were from the old queen and which cups were from those horrible sisters, Anastasia and Drizella, and which one was from the dark fairy. She knew many of those cups had been fancied into their purses. So Ursula, in Vanessa's form, she goes and she sits by their fireplace and she's wondering, you know, how many times have I sat here and heard the many adventures of these Odd Sisters? And then she notices their cat, Flanzee. Remember Flanzee? And Flanzee looked up at her with her big eyes and blinked, and Flanzee could see Ursula in her true form. And Flanzee was worried about her witches. She knew how upset they were at Circe missing. Flanzee also knew that Circe was not like her sisters. Circe felt that her sisters had gone too far and hurt somebody that she had once cared for. And now we're talking about the beast before he had transformed into the beast. But Flanzee did not blame the Odd Sisters at all for what they had done. He had treated Cersei very poorly. Everything that they had done had been for their little sister, and you know, the prince, he deserved it. But Cersei was still terribly upset with them. Flanzee knew that Cersei would probably never forgive them and would probably never talk to them again as punishment. And then all of a sudden, Ruby starts crying hysterically. She had heard Flanzee's thoughts and she started crying. Flanzee thinks that Cersei's never gonna talk to us again. And then all three sisters started getting all upset and crying and acting hysterical. And Ursula was like, ladies, stop this at once. She's like, don't worry. She's like, we are going to find your sister. But first, there's something I need from you. So Ursula takes the Odd Sisters up to a cliff that looked down upon the village of Ipswich. Now, the Odd Sisters remember the surge of power that had gone through the entire land when Ursula had caused the ruination of this village years before. Not even the old queen's rage had caused as much destruction. The evil queen had still had an inkling of love in her heart for her stepdaughter Snow White, and that had been her failing. Her heart had never been completely filled with hate. To this day, the evil queen would steal glimpses of her daughter Snow White from the beyond through an enchanted magic mirror. The mirror that the sisters had given her, the same mirror that she, the evil queen, had the slave in the mirror helping her with all her magic. Same mirror. Anyway, the idea of this filled the sisters with rage, because as long as Snow White had that mirror, the evil queen could protect her from beyond. So Snow White was forever out of the reach of the Odd Sisters. So yeah, the evil queen had been a disappointment. But Ursula wouldn't be. Ursula didn't have anybody in her life to distract her or compete for her love. So Ursula would be able to completely fill her heart with hate. Even the beast had been close. He had hate within him. And if it hadn't been for Cersei and Belle, he probably would have died from his hateful and greedy ways. But again, not like Ursula. Her hate and anger was righteous and pure, and not tainted by self-doubt. So the sisters ask her, they're like, why did you bring us here? And why did you destroy this town in the first place? They're like, there's plenty of fishing villages filled with townspeople and their murderous ways. Why did you decide to take revenge on this one? And Ursula laughs. She's like, I didn't want revenge on these people because they ate fish. This was personal. And Ursula tells the sisters, she's like, this is my home. This is where it all began. Then Ursula tells them that they're there because Ursula wants them to help her kill Triton. Now, the sisters knew that in order to accomplish this, they would need to have the same hate-infused magic as Ursula did. They needed to be emotionally invested in this situation as Ursula was. So they needed to hear Ursula's story. True hate isn't conjured, it's birthed. It has to come from so deep within that it becomes its own entity so that it can slither into the hearts of your enemy and choke them. Then the sisters again thought of Cersei. They felt that for the first time ever, their sister's heart was full of hate for them for having meddled with the Beast Prince. They didn't think Circe could ever have hate for anyone, let alone her own family. But there was nothing that the Odd Sisters could do about that now. The thought of never seeing their little sister again was just too much to bear. It would have been the most terrible of punishments for them. And so they were happy to risk so much to help Ursula destroy the Sea King, Triton. And with stakes like these, they knew they'd be able to muster the hate that they needed to help Ursula kill Triton. Then Ursula tells the Odd Sisters her story, finally. She tells them that her father had found her floating in the sea, clutching to some driftwood that he assumed was from some shipwreck. He saved her and he took her back to his village where he raised her as his daughter. He had been the only person in the world who truly loved her. Neither of them knew about the power and magic and non-human thing that was growing inside of her. And Ursula said that she had wished that she had gone to him when she started feeling something other than human. When she did start showing signs of being something other than human, the call of the sea was really nagging at her, and she would go and she would stand on the cliffs and just stare into the sea. The village that she lived in was full of just simple-minded fools who were very eager to blame any little bad thing that ever happened to them or the village on the gods. And they would point their finger at anyone that they felt had brought the gods' fury upon the people, including Ursula. Now every day Ursula would go to the cliffs and stare out at sea and wonder why she felt the way she did. She felt this crazy urge to just jump off of the cliff into the sea. And she thought, you know, if I did that, I would surely die. Anybody would die if they did that. But then she also had the sense that she wouldn't die. And every day she would just sit there and stare out at sea and try to force herself to not jump until one day she just couldn't take it anymore and she did jump. When she was unharmed and made it back to the beach, all of the village people were standing on the shore waiting for her. They had seen everything. They had seen that she jumped into the rocky shores from the cliff and not die. Now, we all know that in the olden days, this was supposedly a way to prove that someone was a witch. They would toss them from the cliffs, and if they died, well, then they weren't a witch. But if they lived, then they were, because I guess only a witch would have the power to keep herself from dying in that situation. Anyway, so they all grabbed Ursula and they dragged her to the center of town, and they were gonna burn her as a witch. These were people that she had known her whole life, and they were coming out of their homes with any type of wooden furniture or whatever they had and throwing it onto her pyre so that they could burn her as a witch. Now her father shows up and he uses his harpoon, because remember, he was a fisherman, and he uses his harpoon to scare a bunch of them away. And he threatened to kill any of them that harmed his daughter. But pretty soon the crowd was getting too big, so he put himself between them and Ursula to give her a chance to escape. And they ripped him to shreds, literally limb from limb, trying to get at Ursula. But she did escape, and she escaped into Triton's realm, into the sea. Then Triton finds her, and he takes her back to his kingdom and presents her to everyone as his long-lost, beloved sister. But he would not allow Ursula to live among his people in her true form. He forced her to take the form, her semi-human form, Vanessa, with the exception of a mermaid's tail. She's telling the Odd Sisters all this, and at this part, she gets very upset. She was very upset that he wouldn't allow her to live in her true form, that he must have been ashamed of her somehow. And she felt that he had stolen her true beauty and forced her to be something loathsome. And Ursula tells the Odd Sisters that Triton had actually told her that her father had deserved to die because of all his murderous fishing. Ursula felt that Triton had cast her aside because of her power. Later, after all of this, he had told her that, what she did to Ipswich was despicable, but Ursula felt that he actually was just afraid of her and afraid that she would do something like that to him and his kingdom and take his kingdom by force. But Ursula says, but to get back at him, I am going to take his kingdom by force, and I'm going to use one of his daughters to get at him, his littlest, Princess Ariel. Fortunately for her and the Odd Sisters, Ariel was actually going to make it pretty easy on them. Ursula was like, she's fallen in love with a human. And the Odd Sisters are like, oh, so that means she'll want to become human. Then we can kill Triton and break his heart, turning his daughter into something that he hates. Then he'll understand true loss. And Ursula's like, yeah, but not before we take his soul. His daughter is going to pay for the sins of her father. And then they all start wickedly laughing. Now during all this, we see Princess Tulip Morningstar sitting in her castle. Remember her from the last book? She was the princess that was supposed to marry the Beast Prince after Circe. And remember how she had flung herself off of the cliffs when she was in such despair over being dumped by him before he had made his complete transformation? Well, I guess after she'd done that, Ursula found her and she made a deal with her and said, surely you don't truly want to end your life over this guy. And Princess Tulip was like, you're right. I didn't realize till just now how much I actually appreciate my life and I don't want to die. So Ursula tells her that she'll save her life in exchange for Tulip's beauty and voice. And Tulip was perfectly fine with this. It was her beauty that had gotten her in this big mess anyway. It was her beauty that had gotten her engaged to the beastly prince in the first place. So after that day, Tulip had decided that she was done being a princess. And even though her father really wanted her to marry a wealthy prince, she just couldn't do it. But then an enchanting young woman named Circe had come to her to negotiate on her behalf with the Sea Witch. This young woman, Circe, was going to get Tulip's beauty and voice back for her, but Tulip didn't want it. And Circe was confused by this, but it was also kind of too late. Tulip had gotten the seashell necklace that Ursula wanted, that Triton had stolen from her a long time ago. Circe had gotten it from her sisters, and she had used it to negotiate getting Tulip's beauty and voice back for her. And it was kind of too late. They had already made the deal. So the next morning, Tulip's beauty and voice was back. Every prince in all the kingdoms wanted to marry her and had been traveling to Morningstar Castle to try and start up a courtship with her. But Tulip was more content spending her days reading, and she did not want to get married again. She was really enjoying spending her time reading about brave young women who had escaped their evil stepmothers, or about the dark fairy who had put a spell on a princess. Now all of a sudden, her nanny comes into the room, and she's got a basket with her. And Tulip's like, "Oh, what's that?" And her nanny's like, "Well, I don't know what it is exactly, but it's from that horrible beast prince." Now, they had heard that he'd actually changed his ways due to a very remarkable young woman named Belle. But, you know, Cersei, she'd been hurt and she didn't really care about that. She felt he was still a pretty terrible person. And she could never forget the terrible treatment of her. So Tulip opens the basket, and it's Flanzee, the cat. Flanzee had lived at the beast's castle for a time and was sometimes her only comfort when she would stay there when her and the beast prince were engaged. Now Tulip assumed that Flanzee had been sent to her by someone at the beast's castle. Tulip didn't know that, you know, Flanzee had belonged to the Odd Sisters, or who the Odd Sisters were even. Tulip and Nanny also didn't know that Flanzee had actually sent herself. She was trying to find out and was going to do a little eavesdropping on them two to see if they had any idea where Cersei was. Now Nanny was a little bit suspicious since Flanzee had come from the beast's castle, and Flanzee picked up on this. And Flanzee, she actually wouldn't be surprised at all if Nanny was a witch herself. Now back in the sea, Ursula was in her lair. The Odd Sisters were up on land. They had their tasks to do. The only element that Ursula needed for her spell to kill Triton was Ariel's soul. So she was hanging out in her lair waiting for Triton's daughter to pay her a visit. And she was watching Ariel through her mystical bubble that the Odd Sisters had actually given to her last time they had seen her. Now Ursula wondered what Ariel was like, Triton's daughter. She wondered if she was anything like her mother, Athena. Ursula knew Athena and thought of her fondly. Athena had been the only one to defend Ursula and to tell Triton that, you know, their parents had wanted them to rule together. Athena never made her feel loathsome or gross. Ursula's heart was starting to hurt at the memory of her, so she quickly put her out of her mind. She needed to focus and concentrate on getting Ariel's soul. Then we come to the whole poor unfortunate souls scene. Ariel shows up and she makes a deal with Ursula to change her into a human, and the whole, 3 days to get Eric to kiss her thing. Now, sometime later, Tulip and her nanny are up in the king's highest tower. They're looking down into the courtyard and outside the castle gates. And there's all these gentlemen, callers, that are there to try and convince Tulip to marry them. And there was a lot. There was like 45 of them. And some even began fighting over her. And Tulip's looking down on them, and she says to her nanny, she's like, "This is getting ridiculous." And Nanny is like, "Yeah, I agree. I think we may need to call upon Cersei for help." And Tulip's like, "Well, how do we do that?" And Nanny is like, "You know what? Just leave it to me and little Flanzee here." She picks up the cat. She goes down into the kitchen and starts gathering things. Now, Flanzee knew what Nanny was up to. She knew that Nanny was intending to cast a spell. So she had been right about Nanny. She was a witch. And Nanny turns to Flanzee and she's like, "Yes, my precious, you are right. And I know who you belong to. But never mind that now. They don't meddle with me anymore, not ever since our dealings with the Dark Fairy." Now, Flanzee did not know what she was talking about, but she kind of just brushed it off because they needed to get to work trying to find Cersei. But then, all of a sudden, one of the guardsmen come into the kitchen and he orders them up back into the tower because the castle is under siege. Now back at the Odd Sisters' gingerbread mansion, one of Maleficent's crows was sitting in the apple tree outside of their kitchen window. And when the sisters noticed this crow, they knew right away that it was from Maleficent. And they look at each other and they're like, oh, do you think she knows? One of the other sisters is like, well, she knows something. I think this crow is supposed to be some kind of a warning. Maybe, you know, not to trust Ursula. And Lucinda's like, well, who is she to warn us? This woman that meddles in the lives of children. And Ruby's like, she gasped. She's like, we're not supposed to speak of her. She's like, we made a promise not to speak of the child. And Lucinda's like, and we're gonna keep that promise, but Maleficent cannot interfere with our aims or us trying to find Circe. So Lucinda, she goes up to the crow and she's like, you tell your mistress to stop meddling in our affairs. Our business is our business. She's like, we appreciate her friendship very much, but if she wants our continued support, she'll stop sending threatening omens. And with that, the crow cawed and flew off back to the land of fairies and sleeping princesses. Then Ruby says to her sister, she's like, you know, what if Maleficent's right? What if we can't trust Ursula? She's like, she has, you know, Ursula has no reason to betray us, but neither does Maleficent. She's like, it's all a little confusing. But then Lucinda's like, not really. She's like, Maleficent has never had any love for Ursula. It's like I said, water and fire don't mix. Now back at Princess Morningstar's castle, the entire household was held up in the highest tower. Her mother and father were not there. They were both away. And down in the courtyard, a young man named Prince Popinjay from 2 kingdoms over was yelling and screaming orders at all the other gentlemen callers. And they had a battering ram and they were trying to break down the gate to the castle. And Tulip asked her nanny, she was like, were you able to get a hold of Circe? And Nanny was like, no, unfortunately, I couldn't. The guardsman ran in and told me to come up here. Tulip was getting very worried. She's like, we have to do something. And Nanny was like, well, I guess I'll just have to do it up here. She walks over to a desk. She grabs 3 candles and a piece of chalk. She puts the candles down in a triangular fashion. Then she draws a big circle of conjuration around the triangle laid out candles. I think you know what I'm trying to say here. Then Flanzee and Nanny, they stand in the place of power. And Nanny says, we beseech the wind, fire, and sea, bring us the witch, bring Circe to me. Then they see Circe's image materialize in the middle of the circle, and she's very sickly looking and like worn from crying. And they're like, Circe, what's happened? Where are you? But before she could answer, her image started to break up and reform into the image of Ursula. Now Flanzee jumps behind the bust of the king. She didn't want Ursula to see her. She didn't want the Odd Sisters to find out what she was up to just yet. And Ursula says, so this is the famous witch of legends. And Nanny's like, I was calling upon the sister of the dreaded 3. And Ursula says, I know who you were trying to summon. She's like, but you did call upon the wind, fire, and sea. So here I am. You should be fortunate and lucky enough for me to even answer your summons. She's like, but if, you want me to leave, I will. You can deal with the rabble at the gate on your own. And Tulip's like, no, don't leave. She's like, we want your help. And Ursula's like, well, it looks like you've gotten yourself into some trouble again. Nanny speaks up and she's She's like, no, 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 you leave Tulip alone. She's like, no more of your deals. She's like, you keep your tentacles away from her. And Ursula laughs and she's like, she has nothing I want or need. She's like, I'm here out of pure charity. So what are we gonna do about Prince Popinjay and his crew here? And she casts her hands up and she starts using her magic to control the waves. And the waves, they swell up to epic heights, and then they start crashing down onto the gates and onto the men and battering them violently. And Tulip starts screaming. She's like, stop, stop, you're gonna kill them. And Ursula's like, what do you care? And Tulip's like, well, you know, I don't, but I don't want to see them die. And Ursula's like, well, then close your eyes, dear. And the waves keep smashing on the men harder and harder until finally Ursula says, I think that will do. And she calms the waves down, leaving the men scattered about the courtyard. And Ursula's like, oh yeah, one more thing. What is it that you want with Cersei? And Nanny's like, that's none of your concern. And Ursula's like, oh, isn't it? She's like, it kind of is, because I'm helping the Odd Sisters try and find her. And Nanny's like, well, you know, I probably would have found her if you hadn't come and interrupted. And Nanny's like, you know, I think, and then she stops herself and she's like, thinking to herself, yeah, I probably shouldn't trust Ursula. And Ursula's like, you think what? And Tulip jumps in and she says, you know, I think that we're very fortunate that you decided to answer our summons. And Ursula's like, yes, you are. And then Ursula disappears, leaving Flanzee and Nanny to wonder how Ursula knew that they were trying to summon Cersei. Now back at the sisters' gingerbread style mansion, the sisters wanted to make sure that they could trust Ursula and that she was telling them the truth about all of this. So they conjured up a window to the past in their fireplace, and they summoned the moment when Ursula and Triton had spoken last. Now in the flames, they saw the day that Ursula had saved Tulip, and they're saying goodbye to each other on the shore. And Tulip, she goes back home to her father's castle, and Ursula returns to the sea and to her lair. When she got home, she saw Triton's shell chariot parked outside of her place. And when she gets inside, he's like, well, I see you've been keeping yourself busy, talking about her garden of souls. And she's like, you're trespassing. And he says to her that, you know, he thinks that the extent of her exile was not good enough, seeing that she was making deals with some of his subjects. And she's like, my contracts with your subjects are perfectly binding. She's like, there's nothing your magic can do about it, brother. And he's like, don't call me brother, you ugly, vile monster. She's like, you know, there was a time when your words actually hurt me, but now they just fuel my hate for you. And Triton says, you know, you've been violating the laws of the sea for far too long. He's like, you should go back to the shores with those vile humans. And she knew that this was a reference to her father. And she was like, don't you dare bring up my father. And Triton's like, that wasn't your real father. And Ursula just screams at him to get out, and that, you know, his rule didn't extend to her in these uncharted waters. These parts were not part of his kingdom. And Triton's like, this is your final warning. He's like, you have always been this way. Even as a child, you refused to take the proper form. And Ursula looks at him and she goes, what did you just say? And he says, you heard me. You're a vile little thing. He's like, I left you on purpose, floating adrift. He's like, because I foresaw the monster that you would become. And Ursula's like, she's like, wait a minute. She's like, you left me there? She's like, I wasn't lost. And Triton's like, yes, and I clearly made the right choice. Now this betrayal that Ursula is just learning about is beyond her comprehension. And then she's thinking, oh my God, did my parents know? She's like, no way. There's no way they could have been okay with this. They probably don't even suspect their perfect son of such a terrible deed. Then Ursula was thinking, she's like, you know what? I bet you my father had dictated to Triton that he either prove Ursula was dead or that she was unworthy of ruling so that he could take the throne alone. Which is why he probably came and found Ursula that day and took her back to the kingdom. And she's thinking, could her parents have been privy to all this? So Ursula decided there was absolutely no more love for her brother. And this was when she decided that she was going to get her revenge. Now back in Ursula's lair, remember this scene with Ursula and Triton had been something that the Odd Sisters were watching in the past. Okay, so now back to the present. Ursula's in her lair and she's watching Ariel and Prince Eric in her magical sphere, and she sees them almost kiss in the lagoon. And this was far too close for her liking, so she decided to take matters into her own tentacles. And this is when she transforms into Vanessa, goes up onto the shore and bewitches Prince Eric, just to make sure everything goes according to her plan. Now back at Morningstar Castle, Tulip had received a letter from Prince Popinjay apologizing for his behavior. He says that he didn't know what came over him, that he felt like he was possessed or something, but that his feelings for her were true, and he asked her to consider a courtship. So after talking to her nanny, she wrote him back and she said that, you know, he could come over for tea if he wanted. Now both Nanny and Flanzee were very happy to see Tulip happy again and kind of excited about a possible new relationship. You know, it had been hard for her with everything that happened with the beast and all. But they couldn't focus on that right now. They had to focus on trying to find Cersei, because they were afraid that they were actually in danger and that everybody was in danger, really, and they knew who was behind it. Now, meanwhile, Ariel finds out that Eric is going to be marrying Vanessa, and she's sitting on the docks crying, watching their wedding ship pull away. But then Scuttle comes and tells her that Vanessa is actually the Sea Witch. Back at the Odd Sisters mansion, they received a owl message, an owl flown there with a message from Flanzee. Flanzee wanted them to come to Morningstar Castle immediately. So the sisters used their magic flying house to fly to Morningstar Castle. Now inside Morningstar Castle, Tulip and Prince Popinjay were having tea and they were making small talk, and Tulip, you know, apologized to him that her mother couldn't be there to receive him. She had wanted to be, but she had to go and visit her sister, Queen Leah. Her aunt had been going through some very trying times. She's like, you know, I'm sure you heard what happened with my cousin and all. And Prince Popinjay was like, yeah, he's like, you know, I heard about that and I'm very sorry. He's like, but I'm glad you still invited me. He's like, you know, I was doing some reading on your kingdom and I found some very fascinating historical events. I'm particularly interested in the battle between the Tree Lords and the Giants. And Tulip, all of a sudden, she had been very nervous. She wasn't anymore because they found something that they had in common: reading. Now after Prince Popinjay left, Tulip goes to her nanny and she tells them all about their little date and how well it went. And Nanny, of course, is very happy for her. But Nanny also knows that the Odd Sisters are on their way and she wants to talk to them without Tulip overhearing. So she suggests to Tulip that she go to her room and take a much needed nap. Now when the Odd Sisters got there, Nanny told them that she had been the one to ask Flanzee to ask them to come to the castle. She needed their help finding Cersei. And the Odd Sisters were confused. Why was the one of Legends looking for their sister? Nanny told the Odd Sisters that she was worried about Cersei. I mean, after all, Cersei had been the one that helped Tulip. Cersei had helped Tulip escape the Beast Prince. Right then, one of the Odd Sisters pulls out an enchanted hand mirror that they had brought with them. And one of the other sisters is like, we already tried that. But Lucinda was so upset. She just kept screaming into the mirror, show me Cersei, show me Cersei, but nothing showed up. So finally, Nanny, she grabs the mirror from her and she yells into the mirror, show me Cersei. And all of a sudden, a strange little creature shows up in the mirror. And it looks very much like one of those little strange creatures from Ursula's Garden of Souls. Now Nanny tells them, she's like, I asked Flanzee to ask you here because I'm afraid that Ursula's going to go back on her deal with you. And the Odd Sisters are a little confused. They're like, deal? What deal? What are you talking about? And she's like, you know, the deal that you guys made so that you would help Ursula kill Triton. And I don't exactly understand how Nanny knew all this, but somehow she had figured it out. And then the Odd Sisters are like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Nanny's like, I'm afraid that Ursula's not going to give Cersei back. And again, the sisters are confused. And Nanny's like, I thought that's why you were helping Ursula, to get your sister back. And they're like, no, we asked Ursula to help us find her, and in exchange, we're going to help Ursula kill Triton. And Nanny explains to them that, no, that's not what happened here. She's like, Ursula took Cersei and put her in her Garden of Souls to get you to help her kill Triton, and then she was gonna, help you find Cersei, but really she had her the whole time. And the sisters just like shocked. They couldn't believe that their friend did this to them. They're like, what was she gonna, like, first of all, why would we have refused her in the first place? We wouldn't do that. She's our friend. And then second of all, if we had, what was she gonna do, to blackmail us? Oh, but now Ursula was going to feel the wrath of the Odd Sisters. Now Ursula grabs the mirror again and she's like, show me Ursula. And it shows the scene of Ursula as Vanessa on the wedding ship, and she's transforming back into her true form, and she grabs Ariel and she jumps off the side of the ship. Now the sisters decided they were gonna redirect their hate for Triton onto Ursula. They start chanting, kill the witch, make her bleed, release our sister, our words you'll heed. Then they watch in the mirror how Triton and Ursula run into each other, and Triton tries to make another deal with Ursula, trading his soul for his daughter's. And the Odd Sisters are like, the Dark Fairy was right. The sisters and Nanny are now all chanting, slice the witch and make her bleed, give us our sister, our words you'll heed. Now everything that Ursula had done to the Odd Sisters was such a disappointment to them. In the mirror, they see Ursula get Triton's crown and his trident, and they see how she's growing with this new power. And they're like, this is why the Dark Fairy tried to warn us. She knew Ursula better than they did, and she knew that with this hate-filled power that Ursula could destroy the entire world. They see in the mirror, they see Ursula growing into this giant, and they see Eric get onto one of the battered up sunken ships that have been coming to the surface, and they use their magic to guide the ship right into Ursula and impale her. And then they all collapse on the floor. Deep out in the ocean, in Ursula's Garden of Lost Souls, Cersei was returning to her true form, along with all the other mermaids that she had swindled. And when Cersei came to and saw the scattered remains of Ursula falling to the ocean floor, She knew her sisters had something to do with that. And Cersei didn't know why Ursula had betrayed her. She'd always liked Ursula. She'd always been a friend. So Cersei was like, well, I guess I'll never know. And then she notices the gold seashell necklace laying amongst the different parts of Ursula. So she picks it up, and instantly she is filled with rage and hate, and all these images keep flashing through her mind, like she almost is Ursula in the moment. And she sees everything that happened to her as a kid, and with Triton, and with her father dying. So Cersei comes back to herself again, and she makes it to the shore. And she can sense that her sisters are at the Morningstar Castle. So she goes there, and she can also sense that something's wrong. When she gets there, the butler finds her, and he's like, you know, there's something wrong with your sisters. And he takes her to them, to where the sisters and Nanny are all laid out on the floor. And Cersei's like, where's Tulip? And the staff is like, she's been asleep for hours and nobody can wake her up. So Cersei goes to Tulip's bedside, and Cersei knows that one of these witches, either the Odd Sisters or Nanny, put this spell on Tulip, but she didn't know how to break it. So she just sat there holding her hand, and then out the window she sees a beautiful rainbow go across the sky. And Cersei doesn't know why, but it brought her a lot of joy to see this rainbow, even though she's very upset and sad over her sisters, Nanny and Tulip. Then, all of a sudden, Nanny and Flanzee appear in the doorway. Nanny had woken up, I guess, and she tells Cersei that the rainbow in the sky that's bringing her so much joy is because it's the wedding ship of Ariel and Prince Eric. And Cersei's like, Nanny, what happened here? And Cersei's like, you know, your sisters and Tulip, they haven't woken up. It took all of the sisters' strength to combat Ursula. She's like, I'm shocked they survived the ordeal at all. Cersei knew that everything that her sisters did had been for her and to release her from Ursula's garden. And Nanny's like, you know what? She's like, come with me. We'll watch the wedding ship sail off and I'll tell you everything. So Nanny takes Cersei to the cliffs and they watch the wedding ship sail off, and she tells Cersei everything. And Cersei's like, so my sisters saved this girl? And Nanny's like, yeah, they actually saved us all. And Cersei, you know, she was happy for Ariel and Prince Eric, but she was very sad about her sisters, and she really wished that they would wake from their death-like sleep. Then, suddenly, a shiver came over both Nanny and Cersei. Tingling sensation that made the hair on the back of their necks stand up. They knew someone was coming. A witch. A powerful witch. But neither of them could sense her intention. The end. That is the end of Poor Unfortunate Souls, the tale of the Sea Witch, and the backstory of Ursula. My main question, there's a couple things I'm confused on. One, the timeline between the movie and the book feels just skewed off a little. The part about Triton bringing Ursula back to his kingdom, it felt like that happened twice. Once when she was a little girl and she had escaped the mob, and then again after she destroyed Ipswich. He came to her both of those times and told her to come home. So yeah, it had to have been, yeah, it's confusing. You know how these books are, there's always holes. But so that part bothered me. And then the other thing was, like, it never tells us how Ursula as a child ended up floating in the sea on that, you know, ship wreckage where her adopted father found her. It never said how she ended up in that situation in the first place. Did Triton, like, do that? I don't know. Maybe we'll find out in a later book, because that seems to keep happening. Like, I'll have questions about a storyline, and then in the next book it gets answered. Hopefully that will happen this time too. So yeah, that's the story of the Sea Witch, and I think the overall lesson was that hate leads to suffering, just like Yoda said. So yeah, if you liked this video, let me know. Let me know if you like my Ursula inspired look by giving it a like. It lets me know what kind of videos I should be making, and it lets me know you care. Make sure and subscribe if you don't want to miss the other episodes that I do on this series. There's maybe 5 more books in this series that I'm going to be doing, and I think I'm going to be doing them in a row. So that's what I'll be doing for a while. So if you like these villain stories, make sure and subscribe and hit the notifications bell so that you don't miss another episode. And remember, just like Yoda said, hate leads to suffering. And I will see you in the next one. Bye. And the sister was... She wondered which cups were from, you know, the... She knew how upset they were. So she could not. Back to the land of dragons and sleeping fairies. No. She's like, you can deal with the rabble on the gate